Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Thursday. This is Seattle Now. If you're not eligible for a vaccine in Washington, you can still sign up to get one. There's nothing stopping you. The vaccine rollout is an honor system, and that means some people are exploiting it. KUOW reporter Elisha O'Neill will tell us more in a minute, but first, let's get you caught up. A South King County man is facing federal charges accused of helping storm the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Prosecutors say Ethan Nordine is a member of the Seattle chapter of far-right extremist group the Proud Boys. He faces 4 counts, including obstructing the certification of the Electoral College votes. A judge ordered that Nordine be held until Monday, when the court will consider his detention and the status of his case. It's a gauntlet to get there, but more Washingtonians are in fact getting a COVID vaccine. State health officials say we're now up to just over 28,000 doses a day. That's a far cry from the goal of 45,000 vaccinations a day set by Governor Inslee last month. The Department of Health will likely address the shortage of vaccines at a news conference later today. And we're behind schedule on vaccines, but we're running ahead of schedule on rain. Seattle hit 10 inches of rain for the year on Wednesday. The National Weather Service says that doesn't usually happen until mid-March. It's balanced with some extra daylight, though. We've added an hour and 20 minutes since the winter solstice.
I was going to cover this mass vaccination clinic that was being run by Virginia Mason, held on Amazon South Lake Union campus. Inside, it was just a huge, enormous room. Like, don't think of it as a high school gym. Think of it as like 6 high school gyms. I went to a chair at random to go talk to someone who had just gotten his shot. I was asking him some basic questions about how was the process of getting the vaccine and why was he eligible. And he told me he wasn't eligible for the vaccine.
I hit the other on the form, then I got an email, confirmation and so forth. I don't know how that happened, so...
And I was a little taken aback and started asking some other people the same questions that I asked that first person. And it turned out that day that half the people I talked to were actually not eligible for the vaccine. And so I started wondering, A, what happened here? And B, how widespread is this problem?
That's my colleague, Elisha O'Neill. She's been covering the vaccine rollout here in Washington, where some people are jumping the line to get vaccinated before they're supposed to. Elisha, I want to be clear, we're not talking about people who are vaccinated with doses that otherwise would have been thrown out. Totally different scenario. And that's something public health encourages, so we don't waste any doses. We're talking about people who, for whatever reason, have taken a vaccine knowing they didn't qualify. So did you find an answer to your question? How big a problem is this?
Unfortunately not. No one's collecting any data on this.
Not surprising.
What is true is that it's not hard to find examples.
So tell me what happened at the clinic.
Well, one thing that's happening in Washington state is that every single provider is having to come up with its own interface for signing up for the vaccine. So the Virginia Mason sign-up sheet, if you will, you're supposed to say what phase, eligibility phase you're in. These brilliantly named DOH phases of phase 1A, phase 1B1, phase 1B2, or other. And phase 1A and phase 1B1 are the people who are currently eligible, and other would imply that you are not currently eligible. And what happened, according to a Virginia Mason spokesperson, was, quote, a technical glitch, end quote, in which all the people who had signed up for the Virginia Mason vaccine waitlist and selected the other category, indicating that they were not yet eligible for the vaccine, got shuffled into all the people who are currently eligible for the vaccine and added to that lottery for vaccine appointments.
Okay, so these are people who actually technically did not misrepresent themselves in this scenario. They were just shuffled into the line like everybody else. What did you hear about why the people who weren't eligible came out to get vaccinated?
At Virginia Mason, they were mostly confused. They kind of seem to have this attitude like, well, they gave me a shot, so I must be eligible. They must know something I don't know about my eligibility. In terms of other stories at other places that I have found that this is happening, there are people who kind of reinterpret the very ambiguous categories so that they apply to them. And then there are also people who disagree with Washington State's plan, who think that the prioritization order should be different than it is. They think they should be eligible. They are able to get a shot. Therefore, they go get a shot.
Right. And I am sure people who are trying to get through the gauntlet, who are eligible for vaccines, who are having trouble getting a shot in the arm, are extremely frustrated hearing stories like the ones you're telling.
Yes, I spoke to a 79-year-old nurse, or a 79-year-old retired nurse, I should say, who was on that Virginia Mason wait list and didn't get an appointment. When I told her there were a bunch of people there who weren't yet eligible, she railed against line jumpers. She said it's so unethical.
I don't think that they were confused. I think they were just there. It is extremely obvious who is eligible and what the criteria are. I think that if you're not a moral, ethical person and that you choose to go around the system, the responsibility then becomes the people at Virginia Mason to turn those people away.
And then, she told me, her own 46-year-old daughter is signed up for a vaccine. And she said, but she really deserves it because she's a school teacher.
I mean, I want her to get it because she's facing students, high school type students.
Teachers under 50 aren't eligible for a while. They're a couple of phases from now. And it was interesting to me, this cognitive dissonance, or maybe just willingness to bend the rules for people we love. We're scared for the people we love. We want them to get vaccinated. And so in our brain, we kind of do these mental acrobatics to decide that the people we love are, of course, they're eligible and of course they're deserving.
It's fascinating what the scarcity and the fear is bringing out in people.
Yeah.
And we are not doing it here in Washington the way other states are doing it. So there is a lot of interpretation of how to distribute vaccines throughout the U.S.
Exactly. There are different reasonable answers to the question who should get the vaccine first. And just next door in Oregon, teachers are getting the vaccine before the elderly. And who's to say what's right or what's wrong? I mean, bioethicists could debate that all day. And so it kind of begs the question, what is our moral responsibility to follow the rule book in the state we happen to live in, if we believe that that rule book is wrong?
Yeah, and ultimately, every vaccine that goes into an arm is towards an effort that we all need to get to.
Exactly. That's why the state says they're not putting more effort into policing this, if you will, because they say, ultimately, we want everyone to get vaccinated. So if a few people go out of order, that's okay. The question is, if a few people become many people, do we need a better system?
Yeah. So for better or for worse, here we are in Washington on the honor system, and there will be people who will exploit it. That's just human nature. That's just who we are right now. What other ideas and models are out there for vaccine distribution that you've heard about?
Well, Massachusetts has an interesting idea where they have a form on their website, and I assume you can actually just pick it up when you arrive for your vaccine appointment as well. It's available in 11 different languages, and it has these kind of simplified categories, like, are you 75 or older? Are you a healthcare worker? Do you live in a long-term care facility? And you just check off which of the categories you belong to, and then at the bottom it says, the above is true and correct to the best of my ability under penalty of perjury or something like that. And then you're just supposed to sign it and hand it over when you get your vaccine. It solves the confusion question. It's saying, tell us who you are and why you're eligible for this vaccine and sign a piece of paper. So that's one solution to this problem. Another thing that I've heard from a couple of different doctors, including ones who think about large vaccine campaigns, is that a simple age-based rollout or eligibility based only on age, we would eliminate confusion, and it would make it much easier on the provider's end to determine eligibility or not, because everyone just needs a piece of ID with their age.
So
on
anybody
it.
born after this date or before this date is eligible for a vaccine. Just like the alcohol things at the liquor store. If you weren't born before this date, you can't buy booze.
And of course, there is a problem with age-based criteria in that the reason we have more complicated criteria than that is because age-based criteria privileges white and wealthy individuals. You're more likely to be 95 if you are white and well off. And so it means that white people would be getting the vaccine first. And that's the reason that Washington came up with these more complicated criteria, was to try to promote equity. The way this is happening, though, is also bad in that it's much easier if you have a computer, and some people are jumping the line. And so it becomes a question of, at what point do the complicated categories promote equity, and at what point do they start to undermine equity?
KUOW's Eilish O'Neill, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your reporting.
Thanks so much for having me.
Seattle Now is produced by Claire McGrain, Caroline Chamberlain-Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.